Today on China Talk, we have a guest-hosted show by longtime China Talk editor Nicholas Welch.
Well, I'm not Jordan Schneider. I'm Nicholas Welch. I'm one of Jordan Schneider's editors at China Talk. I'm here in Taipei with Paul Huang of the Taiwan Public Opinion Foundation. We're going to talk about Taiwan defense strategy, what Paul's hot takes are on Taiwan's military strategy, what Taiwan's military needs for the future to be prepared for an invasion, and what the implications are for the United States and the PLA and the whole world. Welcome back to China Talk, Paul Huang.
Thank you for having me.
Well, first, you a few months ago wrote a brief commentary at NBR about the United States Department of Defense China Military Power Report. And you had some fighting words to say. In particular, you mentioned that Taiwan, from a functional level, is completely unprepared for an invasion today. Could you just reflect on that for a moment? And why do you think Taiwan is unprepared? And what does it need to do to be prepared for a PLA invasion?
So the U.S. Department of Defense, in their report on China's military, they also had a section discussing Taiwan's military and defense. And in that report, it made some pretty embarrassing errors, I would say, that cited the numbers such as I saying that Taiwan has a 2 million strong reserve force. Now that really doesn't exist. Taiwan does not have 2 million reserve force. There is no way that Taiwan can mobilize 2 million troops in any conceivable scenario. And if you ask me, I would say the number of reserve that Taiwan will have in a realistic war scenario is probably close to zero, just because the China is not going to give Taiwan the time to mobilize its reserve. And even if mobilized, the way the Taiwan's reserve force is structured, they're only infantry reserve brigades without even functional heavy artillery or mobile equipment or any things that you would consider a necessity in modern warfare. They're not going to survive. They're not going to put out good amount of fight. If you look at the history, the militaries, the countries that attempted such low quality level of mass reserve force, they all fail. They fail miserably. Now, since we are talking today in 2023, many people will bring up the example of Ukraine. Now, look, Ukraine succeeded in defending itself, in pushing back the bulk of Russia's invasions in 2022 until today, mostly because its standing military, the Ukraine armed forces, and also its national guards, including the controversial Azov battalion, they put out a huge fight, and they were still standing after days and weeks after Russia made their initial offensive. That's why Ukraine has been fighting and is still fighting today. It's not because of the territorial defense force that everyone talk about. They contribute to the fight, but not as much as people then have assumed. And Taiwan's reserve force is not territorial defense force. Taiwan's reserve force is a poorly organized, poorly designed holiday reserve troops that really you're not going to be able to put in any fighting position, especially not in 2-3 days notice. And even the PLA is not going to give you 2 or 3 days. Just because they can determine when, where, and how they're going to strike. The first strike, what we call an alpha strike, there'll be such coordinated, such extensive, such that it's probably going to overwhelm Taiwan's command and control and an ability to even call up its reserve, right? Not to mention the reserves are useless by design.
Yeah, well, to draw another Ukraine parallel, critics of that viewpoint would point to, for example, the United States' excellent intelligence reports in advance of the Ukraine invasion. They were able to warn the entire world that something was coming. And many people in this PLA policy debate would say the same thing. There's no way that China could mobilize a force sufficient to take Taiwan by force without satellites or intelligence picking up these kind of movements. Do you have any response to that and why the PLA would be different here?
Well, first, there's really no comparison between Russia's armed forces and China's PLA. That is just night and day. I'm sorry, the Russian forces from last March to today, you can tell it's not an effective fighting force. That they have gone a long way since the time of Soviet Union, of the Red Army. They have just gone downhill ever since, and that their weaknesses and their problems not only got fully exposed, but you can really tell that even after 1 year, they have not made any significant improvement to its fighting capability, its joint operation, its use of air power, which should be its strong suit, its use of missiles, its use of long-range munitions, is everything. They have not improved. They have been terrible from Taiwan, and they have given Ukraine nothing but easy target to attack. And if you think the Chinese PLA is comparable to the Russians, well, then you don't know anything about what's going on in China right now.
Well, who's to say anyone knows anything about the PLA? Others would point to the fact that, for example, the PLA has never engaged in any actual warfare since the late 70s when Deng Xiaoping decided to send the PLA to Vietnam. So, in contrast to the United States, for example, which has extensive fighting experience across every decade virtually of its existence. Any reflections there? How do we know what the PLA's capabilities really are?
Well, from open, publicly available informations, including their own propaganda, the Chinese state TV, state television, the CCTV, they have a variety of channels, one of which is dedicated to military reporting about the PLA, mostly about the PLA. And if you have been following that channel for the last 10, 20 years, it's really like nothing that you have seen today. 20 years ago, it would just be PR propaganda, similar to what Taiwan's military, Taiwan state media is putting out about these reserve training, about Taiwan's exercises. Right? They show the politicians wearing helmets and taking selfie with troops, or they show these artillery lining up, firing to the sea, and call that an exercise. The PLA today, they don't do that anymore. The PLA today, if you look at even their own propaganda, they talk about in detail the exercises, the challenges, the tests that have been put in that these units, these troops, they have to overcome to fulfill that exercise, to achieve their objective. They talk about these officers, these pilots, these sailors, radar operators, missile operators, and they talk about how they reveal an amazing amount of information about what they have been focused on, which is to perfect their capability. You contrast that with what's going on in Taiwan's military today, and you should be scared if you're living in Taiwan like I am. Not to mention that I'm still a reservist, liable to be recalled into service if something goes wrong. Of course, if my research holds that they won't even have time to mobilize me to call me out, just because of 21st, 24, 48 hours, their communications, their command and control are probably going to get knocked out before they even think about mobilizing anyone, such as me.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the PLA has been moving less toward propaganda and more toward real abilities. And that's been reflected even in super recent news. In May 26, for example, a Chinese J-16 fighter jet flew directly in front of a U.S. Air Force RC-135, forcing it to fly through its wake. It did this twice. And then the next week, June 3rd, we had in a U.S.-Canada joint naval exercise in the Taiwan Strait, you had a Chinese guided missile destroyer sail within 150 yards of the Canadian destroyer. What do you think these recent wantonly risky moves are suggesting about the PLA's capabilities? Are these actually exertions of real power? Are they mere foreign policy tricks that Xi Jinping is directing to be used? Or what's your read on this?
Well, I will use this to discuss one of the things that I've been talking about, which is how ridiculously overmatched the U.S. Military-industrial complex is comparing to what China has today. The naval accidents that you just described, there was a Chinese PLA Navy Tai-56A corvette, a comparatively small warships, smaller than the frigates. The Tai-56A is, I believe, 1,800 something ton with 60 crew, but it's fully capable of anti-submarine warfare and other domains of operations. They ran into this U.S. destroyer, the Allied Bird class destroyers. That is about 300 something people, I believe. Now, the point here is the Bird class destroyer caused I believe, 2 billion or 2.5 billion US dollar to build, if my memory serves. The Type 56A Corvettes cost something like, I believe it was 120 million. If that Type 56A hit the bird class and the two of them went down, the China would have made one of the greatest trade-off. Then that's just a fact. The PLA Navy today has 50 Type 56A. They are making another few dozens. The way that the China's shipbuilding industry can outproduce comparable U.S. shipbuilding is a very telling sign how the state of arms race is going on. And if this continues, you can be sure China will outproduce our manufacturer in the United States. And they have the smart idea to make this Type 56A Corvettes, which is perfect if you think about it. It's only 60 people, right? It's maintenance, everything. It's like maybe not even 1/10 of a bird-class destroyer, but it does the same anti-submarine warfare job as a bird-class.
Right. We have a well-defined problem here of Western nations and Taiwan, in your view, are not maximizing each dollar spent on the military relative to the PLA. Meanwhile, though, you have about a zillion U.S. academics and military experts advocating for all kinds of asymmetric warfare tactics and so-called porcupine strategy, for example. We even have reports from the Wall Street Journal that United States troops are stationed on the island in Taiwan. So perhaps this indicates that Taiwan is aware of this need to spend its dollars more effectively. What's your take on that? Do you think Taiwan's aware of this problem and ready to address it?
No, so this goes into my criticism of Taiwan's military and the political military leadership. The essence of the problem with Taiwan's military is it has a completely dysfunctional civil military relations, and the political leadership does not show any commitment, any willingness to have a strategy in managing, in building its military. And that including especially the current leadership, the President Tsai Ing-wen and the ruling party, the Democratic Progressive Party. In fact, I would argue that they, in the last 6 years, it has been especially worse for Taiwan's defense and military preparedness, even comparing to the previous Ma Ying-jeou administration and Chen Shui-bian administration, because the Tsai administration sees Taiwan's military and defense policy as an electoral tool to generate domestic political support and, sorry to say, pork barrel. That's what it is. They use military and defense policy as pork barrel to solidify domestic political interest groups and voting blocs. The appointments of senior military generals, the trainings, the key decisions regarding defense strategies and other things, well, actually, there's no defense strategy. All these things were made based on political, electoral calculations. I'll give you one very quick example. The purchase of the F-16V, the 66 F-16, that was made by President Tsai Ing-wen in 2019. That new order, F-16 order, is going to add to Taiwan's existing F-16 fleet of about 150, I believe. The purchase of additional F-16 will add zero value to Taiwan's defense. Why? Because it is well known, well established, almost consensus that the PLA will hit Taiwan with hundreds of ballistic missiles, long-range rockets, and other munitions in the opening hour of the war. And then that would swiftly, decisively knock out Taiwan's air bases, runways, which, by the way, there are not really many of them. And Taiwan had, for some reason, Taiwan's government is trying to retire even more of these remaining runways and air bases. As soon as these runways are out, no more fighter jets can take off or land. Which means no more Air Force, which means that no matter the number of F-16 you have on the ground, they're completely useless. They have zero relevance. They're just sitting target. In fact, I will argue that more of these unsurvivable platforms that Taiwan buys today it would speed up Taiwan's demise when war comes. Why? In the opening hours of the war, think about it. These Taiwan televisions, they would have their TV crew with their high-scope lenses pointing at the air bases, how the runways are cratered, how these F-6, the shiny F-16s got hit by fragments, by submunitions burning on tarmac, the bunkers they built got destroyed by bunker buster bombs, by cluster bombs, and the repair personnel got killed or injured. Think of how humiliating that images is. The brand new F-16B sitting on the ground, right, all of them burning. And also, you can also go to the ports. The Taiwan's Navy, these ships, they can't even go out. They're just going to get hit. The ballistic missile, the Dongfeng series, it takes something like 10 to 12 minutes from Jiaoxing to hit Taiwan. Do you know how much time it takes for a Taiwan Navy destroyer to anchor at port, to get out of that, to call out people and then put them on battle stations and then go out? They wouldn't have time. You just get hit, and you have 200, 300, 400 dead Taiwanese sailors. Right? So the more unsurvivable platform Taiwan maintain, the quicker it is that Taiwan might surrender, capitulate. Just because the shock effect, the humiliation that would ever come in the opening hour of the war.
Interesting you mentioned it takes, I think you said 11 minutes for a missile to fly across the Taiwan Strait. Because I recall a paper written by Michael Beckley, one of your colleagues, and he said, among other things about the Taiwan military, that it actually has the world record in runway repair time. Apparently they keep track of these things, but something like the Taiwan military could repair a runway within 3 hours of it being destroyed. But if, as you said, it takes 11 minutes for a missile to fly across the strait, that wouldn't be very effective. So my question here, you mentioned before that the Taiwan's military is suffering in large part because it's run by political hacks and bureaucrats who make decisions not in the best interests of Taiwan's defense, but for political reasons. Why would that be the case, given Taiwan's status as a democracy? Presumably, the ruling party has an interest in producing a military people like. I mean, presumably that the articles and your hot takes on Twitter you put out aren't helpful to the DPP right now, or they wouldn't be helpful to any administration that works on a military that doesn't function. Which kind of political interests is the Tsai administration responding to right now, or the Ma Ying-jeou administration responded to back then, that's making the military dysfunction in the way you described?
Well, because Taiwan never had a normal civil-military relations, right? In Taiwan, just because the way that it is, what happened has been that the senior military leaders, the senior generals in the Ministry of National Defense, they get their promotions because of their patronage by DPP government. So in the Ministry of National Defense, you have these generals, when they want a promotion or they want to undercut their superior, their chain of command, they go to the National Security Council of Taiwan. One of these National Security Council be the DPP hacks, and then build relation with them, and then they put and maybe organize a PR photo op with one of the DPP legislators or something, and they get a promotion. That's how things work these days. The military is not functioning as a military anymore. It's a DPP's PR machine, which, by the way, I don't think is not going to work for the DPP anymore in the elections to come. But that's just what happened. The DPP, the Tsai government, sees the Taiwan military as an electoral partisan tool, and this is evident in the polls that we have done. That we found that the confidence in the military is very much divided along partisan line. The DPP supporters, they have a lot of confidence in the military, while the supporters of the KMT or TPP have very little confidence. This just shows the partisan divide, and I think the DPP's policy, the Thai government's their behavior had made this far worse.
Right, I was going to talk about that as well. You research a lot about Taiwan's public opinion. You poll thousands of people on many different studies every month. And some of the recent results include, for example, the Taiwanese were asked questions about U.S. support. The question was, it says, how likely do you think the United States is to send troops to defend Taiwan if China attacks? And interestingly, in 2020 and 2021, 60% of people thought it was likely the United States would respond. And as of February of 2023, that number was down to 43%. So we've now lost a majority who think the US will support Taiwan. In another poll, we have, if China initiates a war against Taiwan tomorrow, are you confident in our military's ability to defend Taiwan? And 45% are confident or very confident, while 47% have little or no confidence in the military.
On the U.S. Confidence in U.S. military interventions, that the reason that there was a collapse of the confidence in 2022 was entirely because of Ukraine. Because Taiwanese publics, they saw that the Ukraine got invaded, but the United States did not send troops directly to intervene. And that is why you have a 20 to 30% sweep. After March 2022, we did several polls after that, and the confidence have recovered somehow in the months following March 2022. However, as of the latest one, I think it was a few months ago, the majority is still skeptical of U.S. intervention. But yes, then on that question, it is also pretty divided among partisan line. The DPP supporters are overwhelmingly confident that the United States will come to their aid. Why? Because the DPP propaganda is President Tsai and the Tsai government has the greatest relation with the U.S. and therefore the United States is going to come to our help. And you see the pattern here. It's like a psychological dependence. Like in DPP supporters' mind, President Tsai has the support of the United States, and therefore, even if China attacks, the United States is going to come. It's going to smash the Chinese and save Taiwan, and therefore we can feel confident. We can feel safe. But one side effect of that is also that these DPP supporters they also think that, well, no matter even if Taiwan's military and Taiwan's defense can hold out on its own, the United States is going to come and we will be fine. So you see the pattern there, that this psychological dependency, this faith in U.S. intervention, leads to terrible policy outcomes. If you have any reasonable, any adult in charge of the room, in charge of the country, he or she will have tell everyone, no, the United States is not coming to our defense. We need to defend ourselves. We need to be ready, regardless of what the United States do. This is the attitude, the leadership that should have been established. This has not been the case with the DPP government because their entire electoral, their PR agenda relies on.
What about other allies of the U.S. in the region? Presumably it's not in Australia's interest or Japan's interest or South Korea's interest for an invasion of Taiwan. In other words, it doesn't wholly rely on the United States' decision to intervene in the event of a PLA invasion.
The idea that the cavalry is going to come to Taiwan. Okay, sure. Did you know that the PLA, they have been fully anticipated this for decades. This has always been their war plan. They assumed the United States and even Japan, even everyone else, will come to fight them if they attack Taiwan. Which is why their whole military build-up, their whole defense, their whole military planning are based on the idea that they're going to build this huge strike capacity to deter the United States and everyone else from intervening in the Taiwan war scenario. Those who are familiar with the discussion on the PLA and then the military balance, have heard this term called the A2AD. The PLA itself, they don't really use this term, but the idea is there. It's basically that if the PLA, if the Chinese, they build and not of these long-range strike capacity that you oppose such strength, such risk, that United States will now intervene. And I think this is a reasonable analysis. The more capacity, the stronger than the PLA is. That's in addition to what they needed to invade Taiwan by itself. The more capacity, the more jets, the more ships, the more rockets, the more missiles, the more sensor, the satellites they have, the more difficult, the more risky, the more politically risky it is for a sitting U.S. president to commit U.S. troops, to commit U.S. aircraft carrier, to come to Taiwan's defense. This is logical. This is 100% what the calculation is. There is no blank check to defend Taiwan, where the U.S. president or Japan's prime minister or Australian prime minister or whatever that is, they will look at the picture and his or her advisors, we're going to tell them what the PLA has. They have aircraft carrier, the destroyer, they have long-range supersonic anti-ship missiles, they have anti-ship ballistic missiles, they have these carrier killers, they have hundreds of satellites in the space, they have this, and if we commit our aircraft carrier, let's say we have 50% chance of this carrier gets attacked and destroyed in the first 6 hours, something. Right, and then that the U.S. president is going to make the decision based on that information, based on that calculation, based on that risk assessment. So I don't think it's controversial to say if the PLA build up its capacity to such extent, you will just probably not entirely, but decreases the probability that the United States committing to defend Taiwan by force. So the question is, what's the PLA's capability today in the anti-assets, anti-denial? I'll give you a very quick data. The China satellite fleet, the number of satellites, doubled from year 2019 to 2021. And yesterday, June 15, 2023, one of their long march rocket, these heavy lifting rockets, they just made another successful launch. They launched another 60 small satellites into space. Think about this number, 60. The entirety of Taiwan's little underfunded space program, we have not even launched like 6 satellites. Well, the China, they just yesterday, one of the rocket launched another 60 into space, and those are remote, what we call remote sensing satellites. You have many satellites. You have remote sensing satellites, you have imagery satellites, you have signal intelligence satellites, you have measurement satellites, communication satellites, data relay satellites. All of these satellites are critical in forming what we call a kill chain. If you want to use your ballistic missile to hit a U.S. aircraft carrier, you need to know where the aircraft carrier is. You need to track the aircraft carrier. You need to update your ballistic missile as they fly and to give the terminal guidance. And guess what? By doubling its satellite fleet in 2 years, China just completed the last part of this kill chain. That the capability that's going to put the U.S. aircraft carrier at risk. And this is going to go into the decision-making room in the White House.
What about other factors that will go on in the White House decision-making room? For example, the political will to fight, the utter horror at which a liberal democracy will watch a large authoritarian nation invade a small democratic island. Well, that will certainly play a huge role in the hearts and minds of the electorate of every Western country. Is there anything to be said for this notion of mutually assured destruction, which is to say, the United States and other Western countries and allies in the Pacific may, even given the cost you mentioned, decide to intervene on matters of principle or morals. It's perfectly clear to everyone in the world that a great power war would cause untold death and cause an economic heart attack. There seems to be a notion of mutually assured destruction. You threaten the international liberal order, and it will cause untold fatalities and calamities in the world. And that would gravely affect the well-being of, not the least of which are China's 1.4 billion citizens. And this would, in a direct way, threaten the legitimacy of Xi Jinping and his Chinese Communist Party, which will certainly be a factor, even without the use of nuclear weapons. Do you have a response to that? Is Xi Jinping willing to bet his legacy and the longevity of the CCP on taking Taiwan?
That is exactly why, if they move on to Taiwan to take Taiwan by force, they want a decisive strike, they want a decisive war to force Taiwan to capitulate as soon as possible. What they don't want is a long campaign, weeks, months of maritime disruption, blockade, disruption in shipping. Most of the shipping to Shanghai, the oils and the energy, they also go to Taiwan Strait. So they want to start and end this fight, and this fight as quickly, as decisive as possible. This is their constraint. This is what, realistically, what they will aim for. So with that being said, you can already rule out several examples, several things that people talk about. So maritime blockade, I don't think is going to happen just because that would hurt China's economy in China. Besides, they have the capacity to do this overwhelming all-out strike in the first few hours. Why would they want a weeks-long, months-long blockade that disrupt whole Chinese economy, potentially putting their regime at risk? Right? They don't. And also, they do not want to destroy Taiwan. The ultimate outcome is quick, decisive war that force Taiwan to capitulate, they turn Taiwan into another Hong Kong or a puppet regime, and they get whatever it is Taiwan has. They want to keep what Taiwan has. They don't want to destroy what Taiwan has.
Are those hopes justified, though? For example, on the economic front, it's unimaginable to me that TSMC would continue to operate after a successful Chinese invasion. TSMC, in order to produce the leading-edge chips it does, requires daily software updates, mostly from Western-based companies. They could just easily stop providing critical software updates, and voila, the whole world has lost 90% of its supply of advanced semiconductors. I don't see that going on. And moreover, I think the political cost as well to China, the international arena, would be extremely great. And also, it's unclear whether the PLA or the CCP has any plan on how they would rule Taiwan after they take it. What's the plan for, assuming they are able to gain control of all the island, how exactly would you subjugate 24 million people? And how exactly would you convince them to be happier to join a country with a much lower per capita GDP, with far fewer freedoms, and limited access to media and open society? In other words, in what universe could an invasion of Taiwan really be successful?
So that goes back to, like, if given the constraints that we know China has, it doesn't want the war to go too long. It doesn't want it to be too extensive to disrupt everything. Given that, I think it's reasonable to conclude that the thing that people always talk about, Taiwan's defense, is really just not going to happen. They talk about amphibious invasion. Now, so you have these less informed experts or writers. They always talk about how difficult Taiwan's terrain is, how difficult it is to cross sea, to cross Taiwan Strait. Only a few months per year you can do that. No, putting aside the fact that these are really uninformed, that's totally false takes on the issue. I don't see that China needs to. Overwhelming air and naval strikes in the south of Taiwan, knock out Taiwan's command control, either the senior political and military leaderships, taking out Taiwan's missile forces, anti-air missile forces, anti-ship missile forces. You take out Taiwan's tooth and nails. And then in the process, that you have footage on Taiwan's TV, all these F-16s, all these big shining destroyers, frigates burning in the ports. Hundreds, thousands of Taiwan's sailors and pilots died, and at very little cost to China itself. And they have just accomplished a huge victory. And in fact, at that point, Beijing could just declare victory and pretend that, and then, well, they don't even pretend, they actually had a score of victory, and they say, we have a unilateral ceasefire. Everything goes back to normal. Then what is Taiwan going to do? You have no more air force, you have no more navy. But yes, you don't have a land invasion, but you are totally humiliated. You're totally, and at that point, China give you the ultimatum. You sign a ceasefire, unconditional surrender, the ceasefire for the end of hostility, and we can go back to normal. Which is a very high chance that Taiwan's leadership at that point will sign that ceasefire just because it loses all the chips, all the cards on the table, right? And then of course you can hinge on the hope that Taiwan will persist and then mobilize a few million people. Okay, how about you just lose your maritime supplies, you lose. So that China doesn't even need a blockade anymore. Just because they control whatever is going to Taiwan. You need to beg them for natural gas, for food, for shipping, for oil coming to Taiwan, right? And then your underseas cable car, you need to beg them to repair those. Otherwise, you have no internet, you have no telephone, you have no, and all those things. So at that point, Taiwan will capitulate.
You don't think it could go the other way? For example, in World War II, when Japan assessed that in order to achieve their interests in the Pacific and counter the oil embargo, they would have to do a quick strike on Pearl Harbor. The United States saw horrific images of 2,000 sailors being killed and ships burning in Hawaii. And at the time, the United States industrial base was in no condition to fight a world war. We were already very concerned about Europe. And we were still living in our world where, in George Washington's ideology, the United States would make no formal alliances with any other country. But these horrific images of death and freedom being assaulted had precisely the opposite effect and launched the United States and the world in a different direction. Is there something to be said for the whole world watching a massive barrage of Chinese missiles flying over the Taiwan Strait and that being a rallying effect?
Well, we know what happened after Pearl Harbor. The United States went into total war setting, mobilized the entirety of its economy to build ships, planes, rifles, artillery, guns, munitions. And in 2 years, 3 years' time, it completely overwhelmed anything that Japan could produce. Overwhelmed Japan and Germany, Nazi Germany. Today, that will be China. United States has no more industrial base to mobilize. I'm sorry. It does not have the engineers, does not have the welders, does not have the builders, the machinists, the whoever that is, to build new ships, to build new planes, to build new artillery, munitions, missiles. There are so many reportings out there about the difficulty they have in supplying Ukraine. These American factories, they can't find enough skilled labor to fill the job. They can't size, they can't expand. If there is a total war going on, it will be China that mobilizes the entirety of the economy that outproduce anything that the United States with these Western allies could produce. But go back to your question. Okay, what can Taiwan do? Well, so stop buying, fielding useless stuff. Like this M16. The more M16 you have, the more M16 is going to be burning on the ground when China attacks. And the more F-16 burning on the tarmac, the more likely it is Taiwan's president will surrender. Naturally, these were logical conclusion. These unsurvivable platforms should be retired and just forget about it. And these big naval warships, they are not going to survive, and they are going to be a burden because when they get destroyed, either in the port or out in the high sea, with hundreds of sailors on them, they are going to move Taiwan closer to capitulation. So you remove things that could compel Taiwan to surrender, capitulate, and you increase things that could survive, that Taiwan could use to hit back. If you manage to hit one or two of these PLA Type 52, Type 55 destroyers, right, then you kill 100, 200 PLA sailors, and you have the footage of a burning Type 55. Oh yeah, that evens the score a little bit, and that makes Taiwan look much better, and that keeps Taiwan, to boost Taiwan's morale and gives the international community, the U.S. and whoever, that the time and the space to mobilize defend the resources to help Taiwan prolong this conflict, and if this drags on, then China loses.
What other things can the Taiwan military be doing to, like you said, prolong the conflict?
I think the bottom line is my writings and research about Taiwan's military, about what's wrong with it, that needs to be fixed. The training, the institution, the leadership, the personnel, the tactics and strategy that we have observed, everything has to change. Otherwise, this military is just going to be what it is because they don't improve. They don't even know how to hold like basic rifle firearm safety, and they don't even have a good plan on what to do after they lose command, control, communication with the headquarters. And that's the kind of thing that would destroy your defenses, right? If your troops lose communication with top leadership, the top leadership thinks everyone else dead, he or she will surrender, even if your troops are still there.
Where can listeners find all of your recommendations? Obviously, all your hot takes are on Twitter at Paul Huang Report. Where else can we find your recommendations for Taiwan military?
Well, other writers within Taiwan that have written quite a bit about on the issues. I'm very far from the number one. I'm not in number 10, not top 10 expert on the topic. Admiral Li Shiming, retired Admiral Li Shiming, had written a new book on the topic. It's called the Taiwan overall defense concept. I don't agree with everything Admiral Li proposes, but he does a great job pointing out many of the issues that are highlighted. And if you want to listen to me, or listen to this guy, a former retired admiral, but if you can read Chinese, read his book, and he has some great insight into it.
Paul Huang, thanks so much for coming on China Talk.
Thank you for having me.
也许我一直害怕有答案，也许还静静在风里打转。离开释怀，很短暂又重来，有时候自问自答，不能困难把我们击散，责备自己那么不勇敢。你还没有到达，有不过还是害怕，用力推开你，我依然留下。有一束光的瞬间，是什么痛的刺眼？你的视线是谅解，为什么舍不得熄灭？问你的光，却看见。那是泪光的力量，我不想再去抵挡，面对希望。你的光，感觉爱存在的地方，一直就在我身旁。我以为我能后退，反复证明这份爱有多不对，背对着你如此漆黑，忍住疲